So we are in Karma Yoga chapter 3 is the working in Krishna consciousness, yoga of action. So we are going to learn, as I said earlier, we have Krishna talks about 5 topics and one of it is Karma Yoga. So from chapter up to 6, we are going to talk about Karma Yoga. So before that, let us pay obeisance to Sri Radha Govinda. Om Ajnanatimirandasya Nananjana Chakshurmitam Mena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha Sri Chaitanya Manabhishtam Stapitam Mena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Kadamayam Dadati Swapadantikam Vandeham Sri Guru Sri Yuttapada Kamalam Sri Guru Vaishnamscha Sri Rupam Sagarajatam Sahagana Raghunatham Vitam Tam Sajivam Sadvaitam Savadutam Parijana Sahitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Sri Radha Krishna Padan Sahagana Lalita Sri Vishakana Vittamscha Ek Krishna Karuna Sindho Dino Bandho Jagatpate Gopesha Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namostute Takta Kanchana Gaurangi Radhe Vrindavaneshwari Vrishabhanu Sute Devi Pranamami Hari Priye Vancha Kalpatarapyascha Kripa Sindhaveva cha Patitam Nam Pavnebhyo Vaishnavyo Namo Namaha Namo Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prastaya Bhutale Srimati Bhakti Vedanta Swami Te Namine Namaste Saraswate Deve Gauravani Pracharine Nirvishesha Shunyavadi Pascha Desha Tarine Jaya Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Srivasadi Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna. So what did we do? Summary. In the last 2 chapters, it was in chapter 1, we saw the personalities of Dhritarashtra, then we studied Duryodhana, and then we looked at Arjuna. And Arjuna had given 5 reasons for not willing to fight. He was very compassionate. He was overwhelmed by compassion and said, how I can kill my kinsmen and relatives and friends. And there won't be any enjoyment in this. And moreover, there will be sinful reactions. And there will be destruction of family tradition. And finally, in this chapter, in chapter 2, he shows his indecision. Ultimately, then he surrenders to Lord Krishna, saying that you are my guru now. I don't know what to do. Please tell me what is best for me. So we saw in the last chapter 2 about his father doubts, and how he can kill his own guru or his grandparent, grandfather, and all that. Finally surrenders. So once he surrenders, then Krishna takes the role of a guru, and then he gives them the knowledge and to dispel his illusion, whatever he has fallen into that. So he says, why are you think there is no death for the soul? Because we are the soul and not the body, and the body will just perish and they will take up another body. You are not able to kill the body, the soul at all. So he gives them the soul, and he says, soul, and there's a difference he talks about and gives the knowledge. And then it takes him further because he has said, no, there's no enjoyment. He says, what is there? You're a Kshatriya, so you have to do a duty to fight. And if you fight and if you die in the battlefield, you will go up to the heaven, or if you win, you will have the kingdom to enjoy. So it's a win-win situation. So you do your duty, karma kanda. That's what he says. You do a duty. So he's actually addressing all the what is the objections the Arjuna has said. So he is telling, Nana, for this, you are not killing anything. You are not killing the soul. And then he talks about, then he said, yes, there will be a reaction for it, but if you do it for me, Nishkama Karma Yoga, then any action will not have any reactions. So you fight for the Lord, for Nishkama Karma. Don't bother about the success or failure. You just go beyond the enjoyment. You just do it as your duty and leave the results to me. And then he continues to say, then one who does that with fixed in Krishna consciousness, when with Vyavasatmi Buddhi, that is one-pointed determination, then he will surely come to me, and there won't be any loss or this thing in this endeavor. Because even if you leave this body and take up another body, whatever you have gained in this spiritual path, it will be carried over. So there won't be any loss. So you will continue like from that platform further in your next birth. So he says there won't be anything. Then Arjuna asks, so okay, then now he wants to know how a Sthita Prajna is and how he acts or how he works and how he, what is his destination. So this is how the Lord discussed about how a Sthita Prajna person does. So now what happens? How does this lead? So he has addressed all the queries and all the things. Okay. Now what happens in this chapter? Now we see it starts off with a query by Arjuna. That means he's still not sure. He's still not been convinced by the arguments put up by Lord. Okay. So, but he still thinks, why work at all? I mean, if you do the work only, there'll be some sinful reactions or any reactions. Why at all think you might as well renounce and go away. So it starts off with that question, why? What's the importance in working in Nishkama Karma? He feels renunciation is much better because that is more intelligent way of it. And then so there are 4 sections. So then Krishna talks about Karma Yoga. And then if you cannot do Karma Yoga or anything, then he says you start from Karma Kanda to Karma Yoga from 3.10 to 16. And then he says you can go to Jnana Yoga, but Nishkama Karma Yoga will work. You can set a correct example. And then he says what is the enemy, which is when will pull you down from this Karma Yoga, path of Karma Yoga or path of it. So these are the 4 sections, and let us see what. So the starts of this, it says renunciation refers to prescribed ratio. So we are going to look, this is the flow chart. First starts with the nothing. Then Krishna says renunciation is difficult, prescribed action with detachment is better, and you should go from karma to step by step. Because the queries and the way the Lord explained in chapter 2, it was all here and there, and it created a lot of contradictory to Arjuna. So now onwards, it will be like in a sequential manner, in a logical manner, the Lord will explain the whole thing in a step-by-step manner from chapter 3 onwards. So dealing with the confusion. What was the confusion? Arjuna Uvacha. Why are you engaging me in this ghastly warfare? Arjuna Uvacha. Yahasi chet karmanasche te matha buddhi janardana. Janardana means you are the maintainer of this whole world. Tat kim karmani gore mam nayojasi keshava. Why are you engaging me in this ghastly warfare? And you are the one, and you might as well do the whole thing. Why are you putting me into this position? Okay. And why did this come? Because there in 2.49, he says, Durena Yavar. Krishna tells to keep away from all animal activities by Buddhi Yoga. So he thinks by using his intelligence, he needs to avoid all abominable activities. Okay. And thus, and for him, fighting in the battlefield is also an abominable activity, go reaction. So why is he urging him to fight? Okay, that is the question which he has. Why this instruction? Why he says one end that don't do this, but come that. Okay. According to Arjuna, Jnana and work are incompatible. That is intelligence, and so he wants to avoid the thing. He's still stuck into that. Why I should fight? Why I should fight? It's ghastly warfare. So still Arjuna is in that platform. So what is happening here is, in the purport, Prabhupada writes, is spirituality and escapism. Arjuna also thought of Krishna consciousness or Buddhi Yoga or intelligence in spiritual and advancement of knowledge as something like retirement from active life and the practice of penance and austerity at a secluded place. Okay. In other words, he wanted to skillfully avoid the fighting of by using Krishna consciousness. This is what happens to most of us. The minute we talk about spirituality, we think we have to give up everything and all our duty and all that, go off to a secluded place and do meditation and things. I mean, that's what the general understanding is. Like, what do you mean by spiritual? Why you want? Most of them will think like that, escape from the responsibilities. But that is not what the Lord means here. Okay. So this is what the first, and this is the reaction for all of us also. So is spirituality and escapism? Is what Prabhupada writes beautifully in the purport. Then Arjuna continues to say, my intelligence is bewildered by your instructions. Please tell me decisively which will be most better. So because here, Krishna is not telling him one thing, he's telling two things. One is saying, you should use your intelligence and avoid ghastly activities. Another time he says, you do your prescribed duty and give the results to me. That is Nishkama Karma Yoga. And so he's telling him two contradictory things. That's what it appears to Arjuna, even to us also, right? So whatever the query comes from Arjuna is something like the query which comes in our mind also. And here it is, you tell me one thing, ekam vada nishchita, what I should do, just tell me one thing. Don't tell me like this. That's what Arjuna is asking now. You tell me this. So, although Krishna had no intention of confusing Arjuna by any jugglery of words, Arjuna could not follow the process of Krishna consciousness, either by inertia or by active service. In other words, by his questions, he is clearing the path of Krishna consciousness for all students who seriously want to understand the mystery of Bhagavad Gita. So, Prabhupada here brings out what you mean by process of Krishna consciousness. So, what is the thing doubt was there in the thing? Krishna said, Karmani eva dikaraste, ma paleshu kadachana, ma karma pala hetu bhur, mata sango astav akharmani. You have a right to perform your prescribed duty, but you are not entitled to the fruits of action. Karmani eva dikaras. That means we have a responsibility. We have a right to do the prescribed duty. Once you have taken up a material body and you are in this world, there is a duty for you. So we have title for that. But he says we are not entitled to the fruits of action. So never consider yourself the cause of the results of your activities and never be attached to not doing your duty. So this was what there, and this was not clear to Arjuna. But thing is like this, if you look at, we have a seed and we have sown it and the tree grows and then you have the fruits start coming up. And then what happens? Then you start claiming that all these fruits are yours. But Krishna says, no, they are mine. Because we have only done the sowing. But the water is from the Lord, the soil is from the Lord, the sunlight is from the Lord, and even the seed is from the Lord. And the only thing we have done is a little part, that is putting the thing and growing. So most of it has come from the Lord. So claiming that everything is mine is what matters. So that's what is indicated here. That doing your duty is your adhikar. Once we have taken birth here, we have a duty, prescribed duty, and we have to continue. So this is the meaning here. But what happens? We think that we have done it, we have worked, and so the result should be mine. We should enjoy it. Yeah. So this is what was a confusion. So he says ekam vada. In one time you say we are the soul and not the body. So why we had to work at all? Another way is saying you work for me. So which one to do? So this is the question. Okay. Nishkama karma yoga. So Bhagavan uvacha lokasmi swadnishta pura prokta mayaga jnana yogena sankyanam karma yoga yoga. So the blessed Lord said, sorry, there are two, I've already explained to you that there are two classes of men who realize the self. Some are inclined to understand him by empirical philosophical speculation, and others are inclined to know him by devotional work. That is Karma Yogena and Jnana Yoga. So there are two kinds of people who are in this path. Okay, that's what the Lord says. That is, some like to, they're very work oriented. So they always, that you can see, there are like that people who can't sit and read and discuss. I think they like to have some action. They have to do some work. They have to do planning something activity, or they like to run around here thing, and they want to get involved in some activity, or they want to be like that. Okay, but there are another kind of people who like to calmly study the things, speculate philosophical things, and so that is the path, Jnana Yoga, and there's a Karma Yoga. That is, people are there, two kinds of people who are in this path. Okay, but both of them have the same goal. That is, they want to reach the Lord. Okay, but which one to take? So that's the question here. Which one path? Both are not different process. Both are having the same, you're in the same path, but they're on different levels. That's what the Krishna wants to highlight here. He says there are things, both of them are there, Jnana Yoga and Karma Yoga. Okay, there are two kinds. He accepts. He says there will be two kinds of people who take to this path, Jnana Yoga and Karma Yoga. And they are in others inclined to know him by devotional bhakti yoga also, right? But na karmanam anaramban naishka karmya purushosati. Not by merely abstaining from work can one achieve freedom from reaction. Just because you say that by doing some work that you're having some reaction, sinful reactions or papa, punya, I don't want to do it, that is not the thing. You can't escape from that. Okay, just because we're saying that you won't work and you will be free from reaction, that's not. Even if you don't do your duties, also have reaction, you will get some sinful reaction. So he's telling, just abstaining from work and no one can achieve freedom from reaction. Nor nacha sannyas, nor by renunciation alone can one attain perfection. Even that is also not possible, because just going off to the forest or renouncing externally, you might have externally renounced, the physically, externally means you're not doing any physical work, but your mind is still active. Your subtle body is still active. Your soul is active, right? So you can't attain perfection by that, by renouncing alone, because you are not perfect, you are not matured enough for that. Okay, so Krishna says, you by abstaining from work, you cannot attain from thing, nor from this, right? And everyone is forced to act helplessly according to the qualities he has acquired from the modes of material nature. Therefore, no one can refrain from doing something, not even for a moment. So this is something we need to understand. We can't just take up sannyas or do that thing, which is not possible, because we have to act accordingly to that. So the Krishna first and foremost gives you the answer. He says, not doing work also won't help you, and the renouncing also won't help you. Taking sannyas also won't help. And why? He gives the reason here. Okay, let us see the purpose, right? Anyone can volunteer. Hare Krishna.
Mataji, can I volunteer?
Yes, Mother, great. It is not a question.
Okay.
Yes. Oh.
It's not a question of it's not a question of embodied life, but it's the nature of the soul to be always active. Without the presence of uh, presence of the spirit, without the
So,
presence of the spirit soul, the material body cannot move. The body is only a dead vehicle to be worked by the spirit, worked by the spirit soul, which is always active and cannot stop even for a moment. As such, the spirit soul has to be engaged in the good work of Krishna consciousness. Otherwise, it will be engaged in occupations directed by the illusionary energy. In contact with the material energy, the spirit soul acquires material modes And to purify the soul from such affinities, it is necessary to engage in the prescribed duties enjoined in the Shastras. But if the soul is engaged in in its natural function of Krishna consciousness, whatever he is able to do is good for him. The
So,
Srimad Bhagavatam.
so this is given by the state. Just 1 minute, Prabhuji. So here, which is clearly said, why we have to be engaged in some work, because engaged in prescribed duties will help us to purify. The reason is the soul is always active. It's an eternal thing. Okay. There is a two duties. One is for the body. Body has a material duty because we are born in this material world. We have a duty, right? Because we are born in a family. We have a duty to our parents, duty to the society. We have a duty here because we have been in this world. But the soul is also it's always active. Even if you refrain from taking sannyas and physically you are refraining yourself, but still your soul being active, the mind is active, it needs engagement. Otherwise, if you don't put it, engage it in for some good work, what happens? It is like a devil's workshop. Your mind will be like a devil workshop, and it will be dictated by the mm, Maya. Okay, so the spirit soul requires work. It requires engagement. And if you engage it in the natural function of Krishna consciousness, what happens? It is good for it. That's what says in the Srimad Bhagavatam. Okay, where it says if someone takes to Krishna consciousness, even though he may not follow the prescribed duties in the Shastras or execute devotional service properly, even though he may fall down from the standard, there is no loss or evil for him because he is doing it. He carries out all the injections for purification in the Shastras. What does it avail him if he is not? So, purificatory process is necessary for reaching this point of Krishna consciousness. Therefore, sannyas are preferred to help reach the ultimate goal of being Krishna. This is what it happens. So, purificate, and this is what Prabhupada had told us in the Krishna conscious process is. I mean, he didn't just preach Bhagavad Gita or Srimad Bhagavatam. He didn't tell them just keep reading, but he gave them some activities also, some devotional activities to be done. One is chanting of Hare Krishna Maha Mantra. That itself is a purification because you are engaged in some activity, right? In some chanting process. So you are in chanting, taking the name of the Lord. And this is what our Chaitanya Mahaprabhu came down to preach. This is the way. So that's an activity. And getting up early in the morning, attending Mangalati, then doing japa, then taking then Guru Puja. So these are the activities he prescribed. Plus, he also gave them restrictions like the 4 regulatory principles. So these things were prescribed so that they will be in Krishna consciousness. So here clearly it says the soul has to be active, means the soul has to be engaged. So that you do your material work, but also you do the activities for the soul. That's so that it will be in Krishna consciousness. This is what he says. Everyone is enforced to act helplessly according to the qualities he has acquired from the modes of material nature. Therefore, no one can refrain from doing something, not even for a moment, because the soul is always active. It requires work. So he says, do the work and do the work in Krishna consciousness. Nishkarma Karma Yoga. Sorry, I'm going to. Okay. So everyone, this is what it means that do work because of. So active in nature, and otherwise you will be dictated by either you do work for Krishna or you work for Maya. But by doing prescribed duties, what happens? It purifies. So the work which you need, which you are doing, it requires purification. So the Krishna here, the Lord says, Karma Yoga is better for you because you are not yet qualified. You need purification. Otherwise, what happens is if you still take up the sannyas, but still if you are not purified, your senses internally, they will be always contemplating. You might have physically, you might have taken the robe of a sannyasi and you may not do any work, you'll be thinking, but still if your senses are still on the sense objects, if it is still attracted to that internally, that is mentally, then what happens? You're a cheetah, you're a mityachara. That's what it says. One who restrains the senses of action, but whose mind dwells on sense objects. That means physically he is not doing any work because he says I'm a sannyasi, but his mind is dwelling on sense objects. He is actually deluding himself and is called a pretender. He's called a pretender. So he says, you should not, because you should, first and foremost, you must have a control on your senses and you must have a control on your mind. Only then you can be eligible to take up sannyas, right? But if he only simply externally he is taking the garb of a sannyasi, but internally he is not, his senses are still dwelling on the sense objects. So this is what is shown picturically, that sannyasi, but he's still with a phone and a cigarette and all that. So that means you are not into it. So for him, karma yoga is better. So on the other hand, if a sincere person tries to control the active senses by the mind and begins karma yoga and Krishna consciousness without attachment, is by far superior. Visheshyate. That means externally you might be a sweeper or you could be doing some low-end job in the material world. Okay. But internally he is Krishna consciousness. Internally he is all the time conscious of the Lord. He is able to, his senses are all focused on the Lord. That means he's saying he might be sincerely doing his work, but he's thinking about the Lord. So he's able to control his senses, regulate his senses and mind. Okay. By the mind. Then that is better. So here, this is what the Lord says. The one who can control the active senses by the mind and begins karma yoga without attachment is by far superior. So externally, you might be involved in any work. It might look he is doing a low-end work, but still internally he feels all the time conscious of the Lord and is able to control his senses by his mind. Then he is, it means he is connecting to the Lord. Karma yoga means you are connecting to the Lord. You are doing your work in thinking with the Lord. Okay. So one who restrains right but plans something is a pretender. This thing. I'm stolen by this. Actually, for sense enjoyment in Varnashrama system, what happens? We had 4 ashramas: Brahmachari, Grahastha ashram, Vanaprastha, and the sannyas. Okay. But in this, what happens is in these orders, they are trained. Brahmachari is trained from the beginning to control his senses, to be thing. And in Grahastha, he can have sense enjoyment, but it's regulated. That means if he's married, he is bad thing. And Vanaprastha is once his duties are over, then after 50 or thing, he can take up Vanaprastha and focus on his spiritual journey. And sannyas means is complete. So they have certain rules and regulations for each order of the ashrama you take, right? And there is a gradual purification. So finally, he says one sincere person, if he can control his senses by his mind and engage in then that means he is engaging in karma yoga without attachment. This is far superior. Okay. And perform a prescribed duty for doing so is better than not working. One who cannot even maintain one's physical body without work. So he says, Sharira yatrapi chate. Sharira yatra, yatra. That means you are in this body. So you have to function through this body, right? So you have to maintain this body and you should not become a burden to the society. So you do your duty so that you can maintain a body and physical body and you're not burdening others. And so that is better than not working. So by not working, what happens? You are being a burden to the society. So here he says, so first he said, don't take up sannyas because you are not yet qualified. You are not yet purified yourself, right? You have not matured. You have not controlled your senses. And you're still in the senses or on the sense objects. And if you do that and take up senses and not sannyas and not controlling your senses, you are actually not only you are not only fooling yourself, but you'll be fooling others also. And also you'll be misleading other people, and that is not required. And third, what happens? He says, you have to maintain your physical body and you should not be a burden to the society. So performing a prescribed duty is far better than not working at all. So finally, throughout you see in this, Bhagavad Gita, Krishna keeps telling, have to do your duty, perform your duty, but how to do duty, that is what he's telling without getting. Gradually, by doing that, you will be gradually purifying your heart. Otherwise, if you renounce it and you fall down, since activity is given up before purifying heart. So, work should not be given up capriciously without purification of materialistic propensities. So, he is telling Arjuna, you are a Grasta and you have been trained as a Kshatriya. So, engage yourself in war and not renounce and go to the forest. So, this is what the Lord is directing you. And then he says, karma bandhana. That's what he's what, you will get bound by the sinful reaction. So he says, if you do it for me, the work done as a sacrifice for Vishnu, then has to be done, has to be performed. Otherwise, work causes bondage in this material world. Therefore, son of Kunti, perform your prescribed duties for his satisfaction of the Lord. In that way, you'll always remain free from bondage. So, Nishkama Karma Yoga allows the soul to be active, but in a detached way. So, to protect him from bondage. Okay, so that's the thing. As a sacrifice to the Lord, or as work cause bondage. And you have to act under the guidance of a spiritual master. It will gradually elevate and develop transcendental loving service to the Lord, and you go back. Otherwise, what happens? If you work for yourself, then you are caught in the cycle of birth and death. So it could be good action or it could be bad action. So good action will be, you'll have a lot of punya, bad action can be power. But still, both will bind you into this cycle of birth and death. So he says, if you work as a sacrifice to the Lord, that means work will not cause bondage. So work has to be done as a devotion, karma yoga. That means you do it for the Lord, nishkama karma yoga. Okay, so this is what we need to understand, that yes, we have a duty and we have a material body and we are in this material world. So we have to work through that. We can't think that we are just the soul and refrain from work and take up sannyas unless you purify yourself. So these devotional activities, when you do for the Lord, what happens? It starts purifying you, and slowly, you will be able to progress in the spiritual path. Okay, and work has to be performed for the Lord, and don't refrain from your prescribed duties. Okay, so this is how the progressive is given. Initially, if you don't take up to any devotional work, you live like an animal life. That means unrestricted sensory gratification, just eating, sleeping, mating, and defense. So if you just be like that, then you are not thinking of the religious thing or about the Lord, then you are living a life of animal life. But if you live in a regulated sense gratification, that is the karma kanda, which you're going to see in the next 3 verses. This is a progressive yoga ladder, okay, where you carry out your work as per the prescribed, as per prescribed in the Vedic scriptures, as per prescribed in the Shastras, regulated sense gratification. That means karma kanda. But if you do it, go one step further and give the results, at least partly to the Lord, the thing, then it is known as Sakama Karma Yoga. When you start doing it with no desires for personal interest, that's the Nishkama. This is the progressive way, how people with more and more understanding why they have come and think why we have to give up and how to do that purification. Then you slowly climb this yoga ladder. Okay. With this, I will stop because then we can have some discussion. And then, because if I go to the next section, it will take some more time about the thing. Okay. We'll stop with this.